Welcome. My name is Malika Saar. I'm Google's Senior Counsel on Civil and Human Rights. You know, about a year ago, the great human rights lawyer, Bryan Stevenson, came to Google, came to our TGIF, where all of us come together in Mountain View, and TGIF is live streamed to all of our employees. And so as a company, we came together to welcome Bryan. And Bryan said to us, challenged us to bear witness, to be proximate to the human costs of mass incarceration. And so over the year, in the last 10 months, in fact, we have been doing criminal justice forums within Google to really do what Bryan asked us to do, to bear witness and to be proximate to the human costs of mass incarceration. We've had these conversations in different parts of our company. We've thought about and continue to ask the question of how do we use our platforms to disrupt mass incarceration? Because we know that what we do at Google is disrupt for good, and if anything needs to be disrupted, it's the overcriminalization of our Black and brown communities. But most of how we've had that conversation has really been without the words and lived experiences of women and girls. And so today, as part of Women's History Month, we want to be able to delve deeply into what is mass incarceration from the perspective of women and girls. When we talk about achieving racial justice, how do we do it from a gendered lens? Up to 80% of women behind bars have been subject to some form of sexual violence. Sexual violence is the primary predictor of girls going behind bars. And women and girls are the fastest growing prison populations. We must have this conversation as part of our overall commitment to disrupting mass incarceration. We cannot have any real comprehensive discourse around criminalization of Black and brown communities without centering the experiences of women and girls. And with that, it is my absolute honor and privilege to introduce to you the founder and executive director of the National Council for Formerly Incarcerated and Incarcerated Women and Girls, Andrea James.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. I'm not going to belabor anything beyond what Malika has said. I cannot underscore enough the importance of the words that she did say. I want to say thank you to everybody here at Google, both in this room and those of you who are on live stream, for tuning in to this incredibly important issue. And I think without me going on any further, you will understand why it was so important by the end of our time here together. Ms. Alice, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Can you see me at all?
No, I don't see you right now.
Okay, well, I love you. I don't know what I'm doing here.
Okay, I love you too.
Topeka,
Thank you.
Topeka's telling me to do something. What phone? Oh, here. Hi, Miss Alice. There you go. All right.
Oh, I see you now.
There you are.
Hi, Andrea.
How are you, darling? Okay, so we're going to begin our conversation. You are seeing Miss Alice Marie Johnson. And I'm going to tell you very briefly so that we can get to Ms. Johnson, and you're going to hear from her for the rest of the time that we're having our discussion together, about the work of the National Council. We are a platform that we have created, really starting out because we knew that our voices needed to be heard. Our mantra is nothing about us without us, because we are the experts. The women and girls who have gone through the experiences, who have been directly affected by an incredibly unjust, racist, classist, and discriminatory criminal justice system. We are the experts that need to be at the forefront and at the table in creating the policy for not just change, not for reforming a criminal justice system that we don't believe can be reformed, but in creating and shifting radically to a human justice system. and what that entails. So the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls was created to connect all of the powerful, brilliant, courageous, brave, incarcerated and formerly incarcerated women and girls across this country who are doing that work as the experts to create the change that we know needs to happen. You're going to hear from many of them here today, and you are privileged to have the voice of the experience of the women that you will hear from today, starting with Miss Alice. And the Obama administration started a project called the Clemency Project 2014. Obviously, it was back in 2014. And we went to the mat under the leadership of our clemency expert, Amy Pova, who was a woman who served years in the federal prison system prior to her sentence being commuted by President Bill Clinton. And Amy, we have this thing, when we leave the prison doors and we're walking out the door, everybody says, don't look back. Don't look back. It's like a curse. Don't look back. We love you. We want to see you go. Do not look back. If you look back, it's like the curse is going to bring you back. And so we kind of leave there and we don't look back. Amy Pova looked back. She never stopped looking back from the day that she left that prison when President Bill Clinton commuted her sentence. She started the organization Can Do Clemency. And please check it out. You are going to see some of the faces of the women, including Miss Alice, that are part of that. Well, unfortunately, or fortunately, of the very small number of the thousands of women that met President Obama's criteria, but somehow were left behind, 50 of our women did make it out under the leadership of Amy Pova and the women of the council and women across this country that went to the mat to fight to push these women out of prison. Miss Alice Johnson fit those criteria, unfortunately, and even though she's been in a prison for decades, was not one of the women that we were able to push out. And this is incredibly painful for us. And I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to ask Miss Alice. Miss Alice, we love you. We understand how incredibly, Miss Alice is in a federal prison speaking to us right now. And I want you to begin, Miss Alice, by telling us about you and about your story and why you're sitting in that federal prison.
Okay. Okay, my name is Alice Marie Johnson. And on May 30th of this year, I'll be 62 years old. I've already spent a third of my life at birth. In 1996, my life drastically changed forever. I was convicted as a first-time nonviolent drug offender and sentenced to life in federal prison. I'd always thought that only the most heinous crimes warranted a life without parole sentence. I have the exact same sentence as Charles Manson. Prior to coming to prison, I lived I guess you could say, a pretty productive life. I never expected anything like this to happen to me. I had worked in various professional positions. I was working at Federal Express. I had been a manager with FedEx for 10 years. I was also a facilitator who trained other people for management. When I lost my job of 10 years with FedEx, I can tell you that my life literally began to spiral out of control. I made one of the worst choices that I've ever made in my life, which I deeply regret. I became involved in a drug conspiracy. I had never sold drugs. I had never used drugs. And I can tell you, I literally got in over my head. But I tell you, I made some very different choices when I came to prison. I want to tell you real quickly, when I was a young girl, I had someone ask me, Alice, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, I wanted to be an incredible woman. They said, what is an incredible woman? I said, it's a woman who goes down in history, who makes changes in life, who makes her print in life and impacts people's lives. That's the kind of woman that I wanted to be. I decided when I came to prison that because I was in prison, prison bars don't have to contain your dreams. I still wanted to be an incredible woman. So I looked around my new environment to see how I could impact the society in prison for good. So I started serving others and making a difference in their lives. I picked up my pen and I started writing plays, plays that were the largest inmate participation programs in the prison. People who thought they couldn't do anything, they learned how to do theatrical productions. They learned how to act. I started choreographing dance. I found people that the gift of artistry was stirred up in them, and they made beautiful, beautiful backdrops. And the plays became just known everywhere. I also started mentoring women to see if I could help them be deterred from a life of crime. I used the experience that I had with interviewing and job preparedness to prepare other women to go outside and be productive citizens.
And Ms. Alice, I want us to have the opportunity, Ms. Alice, to talk a little bit about the fact that we don't have available to us right now the Clemency Project. We do not have that. We have a Justice Department now that wants to turn the clocks back to a place and time that is dark and draconian, and something that, with all of the education that we have learned over the years and throughout the Obama administration about the need to decarcerate. Why, Miss Alice, you are in a prison, one of many federal women's prisons that are full of women who are there, and only but for conspiracy laws in this country that allow these women to be thrown in and charged and held responsible for the same amount as the person who is the leader of the drug ring. Why, Miss Alice, why is it so incredibly important that we continue and raise awareness in places like this about the need to push and to continue to push for the freedom of women like yourself through clemency?
Well, conspiracy, I can say this about conspiracy. Many of the women in here were women who did not have those types of roles, but they are charged with leadership roles. They have to take on the responsibility of the entire conspiracy, because I was dumb. I was ignorant of the fact, because I had never been in prison. I didn't even know people who had served time, so I didn't know what a conspiracy charge meant. It means that you are charged with every element of the crime. You're held responsible for every act that anyone else has committed, whether you had knowledge of what they were doing or not. That's why it's called conspiracy. So it becomes the catch-all for everything. And these women, most of them are mothers. I say 95% of them are mothers. And I tell you, we know that women, not to say anything about the men, but the mother is the nucleus of the family. When a mother is taken out of the home, so many times the family is split apart. When a man is taken out of the home, the woman will hold it down. But when the women, most of the time, and it's just the truth, the children are sent away to live with relatives, foster care, and too many times they're sent to the streets to be raised by the streets, and the cycle of incarceration continues. So this cause of women and girls is saving the families.
And Miss Alice, you were a mother, Miss Alice.
Yes.
And you're...
Yes,
You were a mother, and you know directly what that is like, to be a mother who is incarcerated for all of the years that you have been in prison. And I want to just, again, commend you, Miss Alice, for your courage to still stay with us as part of the team to raise awareness, because it must have been incredibly difficult to have an opportunity through the Clemency Project to maybe gain your freedom, something that you deserved. A lot of skin in the game. We weren't asking for any favors on your behalf. You earned your freedom, and yet to have been denied. I know it was difficult for us. We still are challenged with it every single day, Miss Alice. We are here as your team fighting to bring you home. But why is it important that we use our voices to encourage this administration and future administrations to use clemency to push women like yourself out who deserve to come home?
The fact that there is no parole in the federal system. For most of us, for me, clemency has been our only hope. So to not push for clemency is to take away their hope, because we have exhausted all of the means. I have not been sitting still. I filed motion after motion in the court. But clemency in itself is an act of mercy and forgiveness. And when you see a person like myself who has did a complete turnaround in their life, I've gotten so much support. My family fought so hard. The Clemency Project was like putting a carrot and then drawing it back, because we all had so much hope that that was going to come through, because I knew I fit the criteria. But as you see, I'm left behind and I'm still here. And this is what I want to say to Google. Google is a company that has been greatly blessed, to whom much is given, much is required. When you use your voice, people listen. When you champion a cause, our leadership listens. You may say, am I my brother's or sister's keeper? And I say to you to that, if not you, then who? If not now, then when? I don't want to die in prison. To say later may be too late for me. I'm already 62. I've already spent 2 decades in prison. So I believe that as responsible citizens, we do have a responsibility to each other. We do. It is not just a social issue that you put on an agenda that sounds good on paper. It's something that you have to take to heart. When you see me and so many others like me, you see I'm just a representative, a very small representative. But there's many more just like me. And I don't believe that the public is safe because I'm here. I'm nonviolent, and I've already spent 20 years, and I've had 100% clear conduct. I was on pre-trial bond for 2 years. I was trusted enough to be out on bond after my arrest. I've proven that I'm a reformed woman, but there's still no help for me unless someone takes on this challenge of helping us in mass incarceration and using what you have been gifted with, a blessed company. We need you, and I appreciate it if you would help us.
Thank you, Ms. Alice. Ms. Alice, as we always do, we want to remind you that we are here. Your team is out here.
Thank you.
We will never... We are here.
Thank you.
And you know that we are going to continue, and we are going to continue to do this work, hopefully, by raising the consciousness level of what you have described perfectly, an incredible organization here at Google, and the power and the brilliance that they have, that we hope that they recognize, not that they're special people, but they are privileged. And people who are privileged have a responsibility to the rest of the human race. So I thank you again for coming with us on the road and sharing what is so very difficult. And to let everybody understand, when I hang up this phone call with Miss Alice, I'm going to go and I'm going to sit down and I'm going to listen to the rest of the women and girls who are here with us today. Miss Alice is going to go back to a prison, into a prison cell that she has been in for more than 20 years. We need to bring her home, and we hope that all of you here at Google will help us to do that. Thank you, Miss Alice. We love you.
Thank you. I love you too. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I'm going to call your Topeka up here because I don't know what I'm supposed to do now, Miss Alice. But okay. We know that you like to hang out, and Topeka, what am I doing here? Okay.
Okay.
Okay, we're gonna let you hang out there, and because Miss Alice is gonna cut off when she cuts off, because she is calling from a federal prison, and they only get a tiny window of opportunity. But we like to let her hang out and listen for as long as she can, because it's like giving her a break from being in the prison. So I love you, Miss Alice. We're gonna move on, okay?
I love you,
and I'll talk to you later today.
Malika. I love you, Malika.
Topeka, Miss Alice is speaking to you.
Malika.
Oh, Malika, right there. Topeka, Malika. You know what? Okay,
Malika and Topeka, I love you. Thank you.
We love you, Miss Alice. I'm going to ask the women's panel to come and join us. So we want to focus on the experience of women behind bars. And Ms. Alice did a powerful, powerful job in helping us to begin to understand that more deeply. And we are so honored and privileged to have your voice, Ms. Alice. And we're going to make sure that your voice is heard through all the corridors of Google. I want each of you to introduce yourselves, and then let's start our conversation.
Thank you, Malika and Google, for having us be a part of this conversation, a conversation that's definitely necessary and crucial at this time. My name is Miyoshi Benton. I'm with the Women in Justice Project, and pretty much we center the leaderships are directly impacted women to shift the dynamic change to allow the criminal justice system to be dismantled.
Good afternoon. My name is Malika Saar. I am the national organizer for the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. I'm a formerly incarcerated woman, and I'm also the founder of the Ladies of Hope Ministries. And our goal at the National Council is to end the incarceration of women and girls.
So I wanted to ask each of you to talk in more depth around how mass incarceration has impacted you directly.
So mass incarceration, like I was arrested at the age of 19. I was 2 months pregnant, and I did a total of 4 years in 3 different states, New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. And while incarcerated, I gave birth to my daughter at the Bedford Hills Correctional Facility, which is the maximum facility in New York State. And I spent many birthdays behind bars, and you know, when you think about your 21st birthday, you really don't think about celebrating it inside, behind a cell, with women you barely know, but you know, you make the best of it. And as women, we make the best of our situations. I was also fortunate to be able to go into the nursery. Bedford Hills Correctional Facility has a nursery where they allow the woman to stay with their children up to a year. And I was able to bond with my daughter. And after I sent her home, they transferred me to Albion Correctional Facility, which is the medium security facility in New York State on the borderline of Canada. And from there, I didn't receive another visit from neither one of my children, because I had a son that was 1 year old when I went inside. And this is not like a unique situation. 75% of women that are incarcerated at the time are moms. And I was one of those moms that was far away and did not have access to being able to see my children. And speaking on the phone or letters don't cut it when you have young children. And then don't cut it for any children, because you're not afforded the bond that you need to nurture and to bring them up. So after my 4 years, I came home and reunited with my son and my daughter.
So my impact with incarceration has started just being an African-American woman, you know, family members and things that have been incarcerated or friends. But my family, my parents, they were entrepreneurs, franchise owners, and they had us living in an area where we were the only black family, and partly was to protect us from what was happening within the country and the things that they went through being from New York City. And when I went off to go to college, it's when I got exposed directly to different things that were really happening in the world, and started making poor choices and really buying into the narrative of what being black looked like in America. And that entailed dating guys who may have been drug dealing and things of that nature, and them not even understanding what had happened in this country to even cause that to happen within our communities. So I had gotten in trouble, and I would get arrested and then go on probation, and it was a cycle, yet still in college and still maintaining employment and building a career, starting a business. And so when I was incarcerated in federal prison, I was incarcerated for 3.5 years. And part of what Ms. Alice spoke about and what Miyoshi just touched on was the fact that I had met so many women who had children. And so many women, in the federal prison, we are taken, far, far away. And in the Northeast, Danbury, Connecticut was the only women's federal prison. And I was camp designated, so I was in Danbury. And you had women from all up and down the East Coast and Midwest who were there. Yet, I would be in the visiting room and there would be no one there. And partly is because you had the parents who were home, who were elderly on fixed incomes, who were taking care of the children, and had to choose whether or not they could have the children go to see their parents or feed the children and make sure that they were okay. And then in meeting women who had already done 20 years in prison, I knew at that point that it was my responsibility to then take what it was that I learned, even being impacted by conspiracy charge. And by the grace of God, I did not get life in prison, but those conspiracy laws are just that. I had no drugs in my case at all, yet I was charged with having 80 kilos of cocaine. So when you look at just how that law is and what it's in place and what it does to our communities, specifically women and girls, one of the policies and the reform that we're doing at the National Council is to change that conspiracy law. So now, as a national organizer, we go around the country. We are mobilizing, hoping to get 100,000 members, which includes formerly incarcerated women, directly impacted children of incarcerated parents, and people like you, who are movement family and allies who can help us in moving this work and getting the message out so that we can end the incarceration of women and girls.
So, Topeka, I want to just surface more what you're talking about with the conspiracy charges, because we know, right, that most women who are behind bars at federal and state correctional facilities are mothers to children under the age of 18. Yes. We know that most women and mothers behind bars are first-time, non-violent felons. Mm-hmm. What is going on with the conspiracy charges that first-time nonviolent felons who are mothers to children under the age of 18 are being put behind bars for 20 years or a lifetime sentence? Can you explain that more to us?
Absolutely. It's happening because it's like a retaliation tactic. It's used because if you don't cooperate in whatever the charges are. And a lot of times the women really have no idea what's going on. I mean, think about you. Do you really know what your boyfriend or your husband is doing when they leave you? You don't. And so, they want you to then speak on information that you don't, make up information. It's people that you may not have even met in the conspiracy, yet if you don't cooperate, you end up getting hit with, as Ms. Alice described, everything that's in that charge, and then you're ending up in life in prison because of the sentencing guidelines and the guidelines chart and the fact that you are charged based on the amount of drugs that is said to have, not actually have. So they call it ghost dope. You don't even have to find it, yet you'll be charged with it. And that's how the system is being manipulated. And so many women and girls are being caught and swept into the conspiracy, and yet it's really a conspiracy against our women and girls.
Do you want to add to that, Miyoshi?
No.
So I'm going to ask you a different question to add to, but I just want to make sure that people understand what you've said, because this is really one of the key ways that when we talk about the war on drugs and the over-prosecution of Black and brown communities and the over-criminalization that has happened, these conspiracy charges are at the heart of how we talk about the war on drugs' devastating impact on our communities. But often, what doesn't get talked about is the particular ways that it's played out in the lives of women. Exactly. So, Miyoshi, I wanted to talk to you about this issue of conditions of confinement for our women and mothers. When I was heading up an NGO on gender-based violence, some women who were previously incarcerated talked to me about how they had been, during labor and childbirth, shackled. And I thought they were explaining to me like some crazy thing that was an aberrant violation of practice and policy at a southern prison, because they were coming from Tennessee. And And I started to find out that actually shackling women during labor and childbirth is standard procedure. It was standard procedure in all of our federal correctional facilities. Fortunately, we were able to change that. It remains standard procedure in most of our state prisons. So let me be clear in what I'm saying. When a woman behind bars who is pregnant is in labor and childbirth, she is shackled. She's shackled by her arms, her legs. I heard one case of a belly shackle during labor. Can you talk to us more about this policy and the incredible work that you've done to change it?
So I was one of those women that was illegally shackled. In New York State, we had a law, 2009 law that banned the barbaric shackling of pregnant women. When I went in at 2009, I was pregnant. I gave birth to my daughter in 2010. And when you're inside, you don't know your rights. And that's one of the ways they control you, by not allowing you to educate yourself or to educate you on what your rights are. So the less you know, the best for them. So I didn't know that it was illegal to shackle me while I was in labor or delivery. And my experience was, so just imagine for me, like for anyone, giving birth, like your joyous moment, a moment that you're supposed to be with your loved ones, your family, sharing and welcoming a new life. And that moment being distorted and corrupted by a correctional officer who doesn't have any good intentions towards you. It's malicious energy. And for me, while I was giving birth, I had the correctional officer standing between my legs while pushing, while the doctor was pushing. And you know, you want to say something and you want to like try to understand like how can someone in their right mind think it's okay? Like how is this humanly possible that anyone in the world would think it's okay for you to stand where I'm trying to deliver my baby and not only put my life at risk, but my child's life at risk? So you not only strip me of my dignity, my respect, my self-worth, but you're going to put my life in danger and my child's life in danger? So for me, that was like a really hard part. And then, you know, the correctional officer and the doctor was arguing because the doctor did understand, like, you know, this is my job. This was her job to deliver the baby and make sure the mom and the baby was okay. And she couldn't do her job to the best of her abilities because of the correctional officer. But after I gave birth, they automatically handcuff you right away. Like you don't really even have a moment to bond with your child, not to feed them, not to just hold them and take in that precious moment. And when you give birth, they send you to Westchester Medical Center. So you are in a prison ward inside of Westchester Medical Center. And then they bring you there and they shackle you and handcuff you, and then they allow you to see your child maybe once or twice if you're lucky. But in that process, once again, you're shackled and you're handcuffed, and it's the metal chain around your waist, and it's the handcuffs, and it's the ankle shackles, and then you brought into a wheelchair to see your child, and they remove just the handcuffs. So you literally cannot walk with your child. And all of these things are illegal at the time, and no one is held accountable for these things. So it's okay for us to be put into the criminal justice system for breaking the law, but it's okay for Department of Correction to break it day in and day out. Why? Because they do not value our lives. Black girls, women, our lives are not valued, not in society, not in the current administrative system that we have right now, not inside a prison. Our lives are not valued. And it was just another reminder. So after I, you know, went through that whole process of being traumatized and humiliated and just, I thought, like, when I come home, like, I have to speak up. Like, because if we don't speak up, the ones who are being criminalized, the ones who are being dehumanized, if we don't speak up, then who will? Like, it's our stories. We're the ones who is experiencing these horrific injustices all the time. So I came home and I met with Giant Tamar, who was at the Correctional Association at the time. And they came up to me and was like, well, were you illegally shackled? And I was like, I was. Like, I was so excited that, you know, there was something, and there was organizations and people out there that cared and were fighting it. So I got involved, and what we did, we spoke to legislators at Albany. We had letters. We dealt with the media. We did interviews, and we rallied outside of the governor's office. We fought and fought. We made films about the experience of what we had to go through. And we was able to have this progressive law passed. So it reinforced the 2009 law. And it also expanded it, so your whole pregnancy, you were not allowed to be shackled and handcuffed at all. And you had the privacy of not having to worry about a correctional officer being inside your room while giving birth. And it expanded so much. And New York State now has the most progressive anti-shackling law in the country. And it's because a woman directly impacted, you know, speaking up in collaboration with allies. And that would not have been possible if it was not for the chances that we had to speak our piece and to make it right. And we have to continue to do this for any injustice that we witness or that we bear.
Thank you for your work. Topeka, we are at this incredible moment around how finally it's a bipartisan conversation on ending mass incarceration. Finally, we have Republicans and Democrats and in the public square talking about the war on drugs was an egregious violation of human rights. Finally, we are saying that mass incarceration must end. But the women who have been locked up, who are still behind bars like Miss Alice, are not part of these conversations. What needs to happen in order to make sure that at this critical moment of reform, the women are not left behind?
Well, what needs to happen is what's happening now. You know, women like you who are in these spaces, who are making it necessary and are committing to this work to allow us, those who have been directly impacted, to have our seat at the table. Our mantra at the council is nothing about us without us. And so that's because, as Andrea had said earlier, we are the experts. And how do you know what we need if you don't ask us and engage us in changing these laws and these policies? And as Ms. Alice said, you know, I just want to reinforce that, like, if not you, then who? You can't look to your neighbor or look to someone else and say that it's their responsibility. As humans in this world, it is our responsibility and commitment to one another in order to make sure that we are shifting this disgusting criminal justice system into a more human justice system.
Miyoshi, I want to ask you, as we get ready to end this panel, what needs to happen to make sure that the stories, the lived experience, and expertise of women is part of our conversation on racial justice?
I think before we even say what needs to be happening, I think we need to recognize and acknowledge what has been happening. So women on the inside always played leadership roles. They made change when change was needed. In New York State, I can speak for New York State, in New York State, women brought college back. They had the first HIV peer education program, which is modeled across the whole country. They also had the Children's Center and Parenting Centers. Like, these are the kind of things that women did before coming out. And then now they're out and they're still fighting. So I feel like we just need to keep in mind, like, these are the women that we need to have at the forefront. These are the women that have the experience and the expertise. And these are the women that are going to be change agents to shift away from that perpetual punishment paradigm to one of accountability, transformation, and healing.
So when I talked about this panel to some folks, the response was, well, so where's the policy person or the lawmaker? And I said, right here, right? You all are the ones that we need, and we so desperately need your voices, and we're deeply honored at Google to be able to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Everyone. Hi, my name is Markeisha. I'm going to be doing a poem for you guys today. It's called Imprisoned, and it's about more than just being imprisoned physically. It's about being imprisoned emotionally and mentally. So here I go. It's called Imprisoned. Imprisoned in a dark and gloomy chamber, I am imprisoned. My feet chained together, hands chained behind me. I'm afraid of what might happen if I fight, so I sit silently. Imprisoned in a dark and gloomy chamber, I am imprisoned. Mouth taped shut so I can't scream. I close my eyes and sleep so I can dream. Imprisoned in a dark and gloomy chamber, I am imprisoned. Hands and feet chained together with suffering, depression, and doubt. But it doesn't take much to break these chains and get out. Imprisoned in a dark and gloomy chamber, I am imprisoned. Mouth taped shut with words I can't speak. Words like I am smart, I am pretty. Words like release me. No longer imprisoned in a dark and gloomy chamber. No longer am I imprisoned. I found the key to remove these chains from my hands and feet. I'm not afraid to fight you, fear, so don't challenge me. No longer imprisoned in a dark and gloomy chamber. No longer am I imprisoned. Cut this tape from my mouth so I can scream and shout. It's a great thing when you make a reality out of a dream. No longer imprisoned in a dark and gloomy chamber. No longer am I imprisoned. I stand fearless. No longer imprisoned in a dark and gloomy chamber. I stand worthy. No longer imprisoned in a dark and gloomy chamber. I stand peaceful, no longer imprisoned in this dark and gloomy chamber. No longer am I imprisoned. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name's Anna Kasparian. I come from a news background. I'm a reporter and host at The Young Turks, which is a very progressive online news show. Thank you. I just want to take a minute to thank the organizers of this event for giving me the privilege to be here and to be part of this, and also to be inspired by the resilience of the women that we've already heard from. And of course, there are more women that we're going to hear from. In this portion of the event, I am going to speak to an incarcerated woman, Miss Santra Rucker, and also her daughter, Cyndia Riley. And it's more about the difficulty of establishing a relationship as a woman who has been incarcerated due to this egregious justice system, establishing a relationship with your family members, with your children. We've already heard about the number of women who are incarcerated and do have young children and have a difficult time having a relationship with them as a result of this. So do we have... Oh, we're going to start with, okay, that's great. So we're actually going to start with Cyndia Riley and Kindia Riley. I apologize, sorry about that. Okay, can we sit over there? Okay, great. Thank you so much for being here and having a conversation with me about something that's so incredibly important and doesn't get talked about, honestly, in the field of work that I do in journalism. So tell me a little bit about your story. What is it like establishing a relationship with your mother? I know that she was given a life sentence when you were 2 years old.
So both of my parents have been incarcerated with life sentences since I was 2. So it's kind of been like a seesaw between trying to communicate with the both of them. And I was raised underneath my grandparents. So when my mother went to prison, obviously it was either she gives me to somebody else or I'd be in a foster home or just under the care of somebody else. So she gave power of attorney to my grandparents, and in that time, it was as if the relationship between my mother and my father and I had been transferred to my grandparents. So it was as if they became my actual legitimate parents, and the relationship that you would typically have as a child where I would maybe talk to my mom individually or ride in a car, it ceased to exist. All of our holidays, like whether it's Christmas or birthdays or anything, we had to go through it in a visiting room, or we never had that physical relationship, that caring and nurturing, that there's just that availability for both of us to sit down and be able to communicate thoroughly and adequately. And I think that's most effective when it comes to that actual like stable relationship between the two of you, because no matter how much you talk on the phone, where you have 15-minute phone calls that cost $3 and you have 300 minutes a month, the way that my father's visitation is set up is he can only get 5 visits a month, and out of 365 days, that's just 60 visits a year. So not only are we just restricted, it's like we can never have a relationship with real sentimental value, because once my parents come home, they don't truly know who I am. And we have to sit and, I guess, take that and try to build off of it. And my mother has a release date now, so it's 2022, so it's about 5 or 6 years from now. But when she comes home, I'll be freshly graduated from college, and it'll be the both of us sitting in a room while I'm an adult and I'm a grown woman at this point, and she's older, and we're trying to place ourselves in a situation where we're getting to know who each other really truly is. And it's kind of devastating for the both of us, and it's practically traumatic because we don't know anything. And the things that she should know from me being 2 or 3 and watching me grow and watching what I like and what I love, that's absent. And I don't know what she truly likes, because even if it's not the same as if you're riding in a car with your parent and you sit down and you hear a song and you say, oh, I like this, and she says she likes it too, and then we can actually vibe and enjoy it together, versus being on the telephone and I say, oh, I like this, and she agrees, and it's just not the same.
I think a lot of times when we hear about incarceration and how we need to reform our criminal justice system, and it's always funny to me that it's called the justice system when there's such a lack of justice involved, we don't really think about the impact it has on the family members of the person who gets incarcerated. Of course, it's a mass injustice for the person who's incarcerated, but also the family members who are torn from their mothers and their fathers. And so I came across an event that you actually spoke at, where you talked about the first time that you had physical contact with your mother. And I thought that it was so incredible, and it shared a perspective that I don't think most people really know about. So can you talk about that a little bit?
So I was speaking on, I can't remember what event it was, but once my grandmother, when I was younger, she used to take me to all the different places. And my mother was first in Danbury, Connecticut, and we were living in Virginia. So that was also not even the hike. We had a fixed income, as Topeka spoke of earlier. So it was hard to travel, hard to actually get that money to go there. So Mother's Days, we would go when I was younger. But when I became older, it became a lot more difficult. We had a lot more responsibilities, and I didn't realize, and it was over this past summer that I went to go visit her in June, and I hadn't realized that I hadn't seen my mother for 10 years. And when I went to go visit her, the only thing I could remember was the smell of her hair, and just sitting in the visiting room, seeing how happy and excited she was to see me, and then watching everything just unfold from the fact that the last time she had actually seen me, I was 8 or 9 years old, and I was little, I was innocent. I hadn't been through all the traumatic events and turmoil that I had endured at that point. So looking at her was like looking at a complete stranger. And I couldn't remember how she looked, and just looking at her and telling my aunt who had visited with me, and just saying, wow, we really do look alike. And just kind of looking into her eyes and thinking, I've never seen you past a photograph, or I've never heard your voice constantly in front of me, actually going through my ears, other than through the static of a telephone. And I think sitting there and smelling her and just taking me back to the innocence of my childhood, and just remembering that I was in the same exact predicament as I was then.
How has your experience with having, an incarcerated mother impacted your future? Because in every sense of the word, you are a success story. You have a successful academic career, and you've persevered through what most people would stereotype as something that's impossible, right? So can you talk to me a little bit about that?
So I feel as though with the incarceration of both of my parents, it's embedded a sense of determination within me. That's kind of, I feel like if they hadn't been incarcerated, it wouldn't be as stable and there as it is. Because when I was younger, when I was in elementary school, they said that I had behavioral issues, and it was maybe I was in multi-age, which is a combination of 1st and 2nd grade, and I would act up, I would threaten my teachers, I would do all of the above. And one day I wrote a letter to my teacher threatening her, and they had to get a police officer to come into the room, and he had to tell me that threatening was a felony. And that it was what basically was just irrefutable. You can't do that type of thing. And my dean stopped and said, "You're so smart. I don't understand why. Why are you doing it?" And I told him that I wanted to go with my parents and be with my parents. And I thought getting in trouble would place me in a situation where I go to prison with the both of them. And then he explained that it would either get me in juvenile detention or I'd have to go to Merrimack, which was the main institution in Virginia. And it was like that day forward, I knew that there was and it was physically impossible for me to be with them at all times. And it just set a standard for me and an expectation that if I couldn't just, I naturally had the ability to do well. So why not just do well for the sake of them or for the sake of myself? Because and just the way the police officer explained it and just saying how it's not the same. I'm not gonna be in a facility with them and it's not what I think it to be. And just thinking of, oh, I don't wanna end up in that situation at all or ultimately. And just trying to be better and set the stakes and let them know that so they wouldn't have that burden where they know their child. And I know it's a lot of blame can go on the parents while they're in prison for what happens to the children while they're inside. And I didn't want to be the one that ended up on the streets. And my father, when he was interviewed for Humans in New York, he said that I was the exception for a lot of his children. And just the fact that he said I had a brother that I didn't even know about, that as soon as he got in prison, about a year later, he ended up being killed because of following the footsteps of him. And he said it's children like me that should be the norm. When they have an incarcerated parent, we should still be able to do well and still be able to excel and do things differently. So I feel like my future is impacted because it gives me a role. And it gives me not only, which I've kind of found my voice because of Topeka, I found my voice truly and honestly because I had never spoke about it until I came to a point where I was so destitute and by myself and alone, and I was just hurting. And it was everybody that my mother had left me with had passed away. So I was 18, living by myself, about to go to college. I was like, there was no one to take me, no one to help me with that transition. And it just got to a point where I had nothing, I didn't have any money. And it grew to the point where I had to go and do everything by myself. So when Topeka came and said, "Hey, would you like to speak on a panel about how it affects you?" I never really thought about how it had majorly impacted my life, and I was numb to it. And it was just that I was so succumbed to feeling, oh, this, like everything was normal. Oh, I'd go visit them in visitor rooms. I talked to them on the phone. It was just seeing my vulnerability and then realizing that every single time I spoke, it was like I was learning something different about myself. So I feel like from an educational standpoint, it shows that you can practically do anything. And like Topeka said earlier, I do a lot of stuff with grace. So it makes me feel like I'm powerful, that I'm invincible, and it really takes me to a point where just because you don't have your parents, you still have that ability to do better and go beyond what anybody can tell you that you can do.
It's amazing. So I just wanted to quickly note on the Young Turks, we often bring up the issue of white privilege, which, unfortunately, some of our audience members get very offended about. And the reason why I'm bringing that up right now is because these are the types of obstacles that, the disenfranchised have to persevere through in order to become success stories, right? These are the issues that I think a lot of people don't realize occur, that we have a biased justice system, that we have certain obstacles for certain communities that people like me don't ever have to worry about. And that's the reason why I feel that it's important for someone like me to be an ally and hear stories like yours and do what I can to fight to reform the justice system that we have right now. If there's one final thing that you would want everyone to know about how all of this has impacted you and your relationship with your family, what would it be?
So I think, and especially over the last couple of days, that just separating a mother from her daughter or a father from her daughter, it's really just rifting. And like I said earlier, it's really numbing, where you get to this point that you want to know each other so well, and it seems so impossible because there's so many physical limitations and monetary, and it's just so much stuff where it takes you away from really ever having that capability to establish a real physical relationship. And just the idea that if you're arguing, if you're sad, or you're having just a debate or just a bad day, there's no way that you can just hop up and say, I'm gonna go visit my mom. You have to sit on the phone, and then from every single penny of every second you're talking, it's gonna either go to waste or go to a really good cause of talking on the phone. And I think more like lately with my mother, it's been, we have such limited time, and like, it's like we're going and talking back and forth and battling about what we know about each other and what we don't. And just to sit back and think, if you were home, we wouldn't have to do this. Or to think about other daughters that might not have the maturity that I have, or might not have that ability to even talk. And I just think that it's unfair to the children, and it's just unfair to all of us, or anybody who can sit and allow a parent to not be able to be with their child in some sense, or just not to think about every single stipulation that surrounds being with their child. And just thinking, if you have a child yourself and you take yourself and separate them and put them in a room, and you guys are just divided by these four walls, and you have no way of communicating with each other without her sliding $1 under the door or $5 for a limited amount of time, and just thinking about how you could build that relationship or how that could taint you. And it's just not, I don't think that when they're making the policies and the legislation around it, they don't think about us as the children. They think about the crime, but they don't put in place that you're hurting us as well. While my mom's in prison, that puts me in prison too. So it's not just affecting them. We both have to live it together and simultaneously.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. I appreciate it.
Before Kendia leaves the stage, I want to acknowledge that not only is Kendia a powerful, fierce woman advocate for so many other girls and boys whose parents are behind bars, but Kendia is also a sophomore at the University of Virginia, majoring in chemistry and minoring in astronomy. So we, because it's our commitment to bring in the voices of the women behind bars, we have a little bit of time before we can bring Kendia's mom in through the phone. We can't do it until 2:10. So before we bring Kendia's mom onto the call, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to ask Andrea James to join the stage with Kendia and Anna to help represent, while we're waiting for Santra Rucker to join us, to talk about more the experience of being a mother behind bars and that mother-child bond, which, as Anna pointed out, is rarely talked about, right, when we have these conversations around the criminal justice system. So I invite you all, and Anna, thank you for going with the flow.
Of course, my pleasure.
And before you all get started on that conversation, there are these pictures that have been flashing on these screens. And these pictures are remarkable paintings done by women and girls behind bars as part of an organization known as Artistic Noise. It's a New York-based organization that goes into our correctional facilities, adult and juvenile, and gives young women and men and boys and girls and our elders the chance to have art in their lives as an opportunity to express their emotions, their pain, and their joy. So I want to acknowledge these beautiful paintings that Artistic Noise has allowed us to share with you. Go ahead.
So I think it's also important to maybe focus a little bit on, the types of laws like the war on drugs and some of the influences behind those types of policies that lead to individuals being incarcerated for ridiculous reasons. So since I come from a news background and do a lot of reporting on the justice system and also policies that politicians propose, there are a lot of financial interests at play that force not force, but influence politicians to push for sentencing that's incredibly harsh related to, drug policy or for mandatory minimums, things like that. And so it's not an accident. What we're seeing in our justice system is a direct influence of things like money in politics, of private prisons, encouraging our representatives to pass legislation that would incarcerate people for profit. And so I don't want anyone to think that, hey, these are people who are just, tough on crime. It's not being about tough on crime. It's about victimizing people to make a dollar. And I think that that's an important issue that everyone needs to focus on. The women that we've heard from today are not criminals. These are innocent individuals who have been victimized by an unjust justice system, or unjust, I should say, justice system. So I can't help but share my opinion. No one told me that I should, or if I could, but I can't help myself because this is something that I'm very passionate about, and I really do want reform here. Anyway, so thank you for joining us, Andrea. So talk to me a little bit about your experiences. You've been working in this line of work for a long time, and I think it's so incredibly important. Can we talk a little bit more about the positive impacts that, women such as yourself have had in this space?
Well, sure. I want to dial back just a little bit, just so we can touch upon the issues that Candia was talking about. Because as a woman who, so I was a lawyer who was sentenced to serve a 24-month sentence in the federal prison for women in Danbury, Connecticut. Okay, I was allowed to self-report. I was a lawyer. We were treated differently. I showed up in court twice, once to hear the charges against me and the other to hear what I was going to be sentenced to. I negotiated my sentence down from 63 months to 24 months, and I went off and served my 24 months. I happened to have older adult children at the time, but I also had a 12-year-old daughter who's currently a sophomore at Spelman College, and I also had a baby boy who I had just given birth to, who when I walked into that prison, so my whole family took me to the prison, I again was treated differently than 99% of the women that I was incarcerated with, who had not seen their children since they were looking out the back window of a law enforcement vehicle and watching their babies being shuttled away by some other state actor, okay? And then I was in a prison with women who had not seen their children for 6, 7, 8 years, if they had seen them at all, since they had been incarcerated. And the feeling of what that's like, my baby boy was 5 months old. I did not come home until he was 2. This is Santra calling in, so I'm happy that, because I want you to hear her voice and not mine. But those are the very real things that women who are incarcerated are dealing with, and not even being able to breathe. I want to leave us with this point, that for a woman who leaves her children behind, we literally have to put our children on a shelf in order to breathe to get through our sentence. That is criminal.
Okay, you're taking it?
Okay, I can hear you.
Okay, great. My name's Anna Kasparian. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
So we were just having a great conversation with your daughter about some of the obstacles to, establishing a bond between the two of you. And, we heard her side of the story, her perspective, and I was hoping that we can also hear your perspective as well.
Okay. Well, it's like the dynamics of being incarcerated is really sensitive when it comes to a mother and daughter relationship, because you don't want your child to have any type of resentment or anger because she feels abandoned or whatever the situation is due to my circumstances that led me to come to prison. These are the things that I hope. But people might feel that is wrong for me to say, like I'm not really remorseful for the things that led me to come to prison. In fact, I think that the greater gravity was my choice and my poor choices. At the time, I didn't think of those choices would affect my children or my family, because I was doing the things that I loved to do at the time. So at the same time, I don't want to beat myself up for my past, to make my relationship better with my daughter, because I can't change the past. You know, so what I'm doing is I'm trying to benefit from the past and move on. But in my own beliefs, I believe that karma plays a big part in the conditions of my imprisonment, because that's my personal belief. But at the same time, I believe that whatever you are and whatever you are not, you earn it, whether it's good or bad. And whatever you are or whatever you are not, this call is from a federal prison. And right now, I feel like I have changed dramatically, and I have raised my level of consciousness to a higher vibration, so that I can be able to be active with my daughter, to show love for my daughter, to do the things, not trying to make up for my past, but the things that a mother would do. I try to do these things over the phone, through the emails, through visitation, sending things to my daughter to show her that I love her and that I am sorry to not be there. So in my absence, I do things from my heart.
Candia talked a little bit about what it was like to have physical contact with you for the first time. I'm curious to hear what that felt like for you.
It felt kind of awkward, because you don't know what to say. Like, I wanted to be a mother, but I didn't want to act too overprotective because of my absence, due to my absence. But I wanted to show her that, yeah, true, I am your mother, and I want you to be open with me. I want you to understand me, and I want you to learn who I am through visitation, because we only would talk over the phone. And it was kind of a bonding time where I looked at her and she looked at me, but at the same time, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if I should touch her. I didn't know if she would reject me. So I watched how other people in a visitation interacted with their children, so that I can learn that, okay, this is all right to hold a hand, this is all right to do this, or this is all right to do that. But it was more emotional for me when I came back, because I was like, I wish I would have said this, I wish I would have said that. And when she came to visit me, my other family was there, my sisters, my nephews, so it was kind of, I couldn't be as personal as I wanted to be, to say the things that I really wanted to, because it was so long. It had been 10 years before I had seen my family and my daughter. So it's really hard. It's even harder when you have to come back from visitations. You know, to be around total strangers that you don't love and that you don't know, you know. So, I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It's very moving, and everyone, there are several members of the audience that are in tears right now over what you're saying. So Candia has done incredible things with her life. She is a sophomore at the University of Virginia. She's studying, majors that I can't even wrap my brain around. She's an incredible young woman. And so, what are your feelings about that?
I'm very proud, and I feel sometimes I wonder if my absence made her life better, because she was raised by the same parents as me. That's my mom and dad. So I knew she would be a good person, a loving person, but I'm glad. I feel like she's the better side of me, like I feel like I couldn't make it, and I didn't make it, and I wasn't successful like I wanted to be. So I figured that with her doing it, it makes me feel proud, because she is me. She's a part of me, and I knew that she would do great things, and I just always knew that she has great potentials. So I wasn't shocked that she would be as productive and intelligent as she is and everything that she's displaying, So I knew that she would be all right, But I often wonder, if I was home to raise her, would she have taken that route? You know, maybe my poor choices would have infected her and affected her. You know, so I was kind of glad to be absent in a way so that she could have the perfect life that I didn't have.
Candia shared with us that you fortunately finally have a release date. And so I'm curious what you maybe fantasize about doing with your family, doing with Candia when you are released.
Well, a lot of times I listen to a lot of prisoners that leave, they make big plans, and that folder seems to be somewhere lost in the attic when they get home. But I know one of the biggest problems that my family face is financial problems. So I've been in here studying how to learn the different grants that's available when I get out, the different loans that they have for convicted felons, and try to use those things to open up a restaurant where my family can benefit from. And I think that finances is of great importance for everybody in life, because without money, you can't really do anything. And I believe that we can come together as a family and be productive and have fun and go places and travel and do the things not to make up for lost time, but for the now. You know, and so I hope to have a restaurant when I get out. I took culinary art, and I taught Candia how to bake over the telephone. So I'm hoping that I can do that not just for myself, but for my family. You know, that's one of the main things. And I just want to be a mother to my daughter. And those things I have tried to do from prison, you know, which I have great limitations here. But I believe when I get home, it could be better, but it depends on my daughter. Because if my daughter feels that I abandoned her, or she feels any resentment, or she feels any anger towards my absence, then it's going to be quite difficult for me to do the things that I would love to do and have the great desire to do. But it has to be a mutual agreement. And I just hope to be the most successful person that I can be. I want to be the person that I wasn't in 1999 before I came to prison. So I have high goals, I have high standards, I have high principles, and I believe that with God being in my life, that these things are manifesting before I even come home. You know, so I'm not waiting for the manifestation to take place. When I walk out the door, I'm preparing it now through my provisions, through my prayers, and through what I know, which is my belief. But I believe that we're all one and we'll be one. It's kind of hard to be one from prison because of the barricades that we face. But hopefully, I hope that through my mom and dad, that the love that they instilled in me, the human compassion that they instilled in me, that they instilled those things into Candia. So when I get home, everything will be as if I never left. And that's how I would like it. That's how I would want it to be when I touched, you know, home. I'm sorry, I get a little emotional.
No, it's okay.
But you know, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, but you know, I understand where I am. I understand the circumstances of my life and the events that took shape to get me here and the people who I gravitated to. But during that era of the 80s, that was like the end thing. This call is from a federal prison. What was happening at the time. And the decisions that I made were what I thought were good decisions. It was just normal and typical for people my age in that area.
Ms. Sandra Rucker, sorry to interrupt you. I just want to let you know that we might lose you soon, and if we do, I just want to thank you for your time and thank you for speaking with us and sharing your story.
No, and I thank you for allowing me. I thank you for having human compassion to be able to be an attentive audience to just take this as a shift of awareness and know that I just know everything is going to be all right just from speaking to y'all. And I think you all can make a big difference, and I thank you again. I really do. Because you have an influential power that can change a lot. And just from the audience being there today, this shows that everybody's destiny and their destiny and fate can change. And you could be really influential and encouraging to prisoners as well, because it's difficult. It's very difficult. It's difficult for our children and for us as prisoners. But I thank you as well. Sorry for crying.
You have no reason to apologize. Please take care of yourself, and thank you again.
Okay, thank you.
Typical Google, where I said working at Google is like understanding jazz, that, you know, somebody's ripping here, somebody's ripping there. So this is very Googly, because this is very much like an act of jazz. I know that it's a lot to hold all of the ways in which we are bearing witness and being proximate to what the cost of incarceration has been to our mothers and our daughters. But I think it's important to stay present, because it's not only an issue of placing and over-criminalizing and relegating our women and mothers to incarceration. It is also a narrative of what is happening to our girls. And there's a lot of conversation around the school-to-prison pipeline, but there's not conversation around how the girls fit into that pipeline, and how in many ways the girls have a separate pipeline into the juvenile justice system. We wanted this panel to be able to surface some of the lived experiences and the lived expertise around what is happening to our girls. So if we could start with Charity, if you could each introduce yourselves, and then we'll talk about it.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Charity Chandler Cole. I am a social justice advocate, and I advocate for various social justice issues such as criminal justice reform, human sex trafficking, and foster care. And I sit on various boards and committees throughout the state that address these issues.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Michelle Diaz. I'm an advisor for the task force in ending girls' incarceration in New York City for BERA Institute.
Hi, my name is Sarah. I'm actually also part of the task force, and I'm also working at the Vera Institute of Justice in New York City.
So beginning with Charity, if you could each talk about how you were placed into the juvenile justice system and your experiences there.
Absolutely. So at the age of 10, my mother was going through a divorce, and she got breast cancer at the same time, and she pretty much afterwards went through a state of depression, stress, and anxiety, and she basically just gave up on the 6 children she had, and we kind of had to fend for ourselves. My older sister entered the juvenile justice and foster care system at the age of 12, so when I was 14, I was the big sister, I was the mother, and I did everything I could to provide for my 4 younger siblings while we were on welfare. At the age of 16, I got caught stealing underwear from Ross. Nothing cute. It was Hanes, you know, from my siblings. So it was, you know, simply out of a pure desire of need for my family. And the police called my mother to pick me up, and she said, take her to jail. And they did. And my mom at the time used the foster care system and juvenile justice system to kind of one by one, you know, get rid of the children that she no longer desired to have at the time. It wasn't because she just didn't love us, she just didn't know how to take care of us any longer after, you know, what she experienced. From there, after there, I spent the next 2 years in and out of juvenile hall and foster care. No one at any point asked my mother, why do you want your child to go to jail? You know, why is she stealing underwear? What situation is happening in your family to cause your daughter to, you know, steal underwear? Here are some alternatives to incarceration. I was just, you know, they said, okay, they hung up the phone, they handcuffed me, put me in the back of their patrol car, booked me, and took me to juvenile hall. I, at that very moment, realized that my life had 0 value and that I could easily be discarded and put away. My experience in the juvenile justice system and the foster care system were horrid, and I experienced and was exposed to things I probably would have never experienced, you know, living in the streets in a gang-infested and drug-infested neighborhood. Any ounce of self-esteem and confidence I have went out the window, and I was constantly degraded. I felt enslaved, and I was psychologically abused and sexually exploited while in the system. And because of what I experienced, and because of the feeling of, you know, abandoning the 4 siblings that needed me, who was going to feed them and take care of them, who was going to walk them to school the next day, just feeling, completely just abandoned, alone, and worthless, I left the system, determined that I was going to work my ass off for the rest of my life to help change it.
Well, everything started when I was 13. I'm only 20. I came here. I did not speak English at all, and my mother was working 7 days a week. The only person that I knew was my mother, and then nobody else. When I went to school, my school class was only Spanish, so I didn't really learn English at all. And when I was going to school, I was shy. I didn't talk to the other kids. And then one time I just went to McDonald's and I met this guy, and he was much older than me, keeping in mind that I was only 13. And he talked to me, and as I said, my mother was never had the time to be with me. And the reason why I moved to United States, it was because I wanted to have that mother and daughter relationship, because my mother, at all the time, she was working. And then this guy who, treat me right, quote unquote, who pay attention to me, make me being in the idea of being in love. And one time, I was going crazy, the only person that I really pay attention to. And one time we just went to the mall, and he stole a t-shirt from JCPenney, $25. And we got caught, and he was like, "Oh, Michelle, take the charge, they're not gonna do nothing to you, you're underage." And I was like, "No, it's not my fault." And he's like, "Oh," he started arguing with me, and of course you don't want to be mad with the person, you don't want the person to be mad at you, the only person who's paying attention to you. So I said, "Yeah, I take the charge." And then we spent a night at the prison, and then my mother came, took me, and the next day I ran away. I went back to him, and this was on family court, and my lawyer was like, "Oh, Michelle, just take the charge. It's gonna be 18 months of probation." And of course, I did not know nothing. I didn't speak English. My lawyer was only speak English, so it was really, really hard. The interpreter was there only for 2 minutes, and I was like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." And then one thing lead to another. I stopped missing school. I got pregnant at 15. I was in 7th grade, and all this thing crashed. I ran away, got a warrant, then violation of probation, went back, because I always wanted to do the right thing. I always wanted to be somebody, but nobody asked me why I was doing what I was doing, what I wanted to be, where am I going, what is my future, right? And at the end, I went back, I tried to do things right, but there was no support at all. And I was a teenage mom, and I dropped out of middle school, never graduated, and I couldn't take it any longer, and my probation officer violated me again. I ran away. Then the judge said that I was a runner, and he put me in a secure facility in New York, and I spent about 6 to 8 months in there. And after that, I went to a group home close to home, secure facility, and it was when I started speaking English was when I was in this secure facility, because nobody speaks Spanish over there, but I could put together the images, what I see, what I hear, and it was amazing. But at the first time when I was there, I couldn't eat. Why? Because I didn't like the food. I couldn't take it. Nobody wondered how I lost 10, 20 pounds in a month over there. And when I got out, I spent about 2 months in the group home, but I was always scared. People talk about Rikers Island, this secure facility, and how bad it is. And I was like, damn, I don't want to go there. I was so afraid, because at that time I did not have papers at all. And then I was like, if I do something, and then was this girl, she was 15 and tried to fight me, and I was like, I can't get into her, because what is next? Next thing you know, I'm going to get deported, and I can't do that. I have a child, and I want something. I want to do something with my life. And then I got moved to the foster care system, where, I spent about 2 years in there, and I met this amazing work, and then I made my mentor, and everything started being put in together. Went to school, got my GED, and then like when I was going to school, it's when I got to sit down with people that have spent decades of their life in prison and how much they suffer, and then I will ask them, why you don't do something about it? And they'll be like, no, they're waiting for the other person, and then I decided to be that person. And you know, if there's one thing that I have to go back to, I wouldn't change it, even though I would love to have been for my daughter all this time, but I am where I am because of everything that I had done. And I'm liking myself. I'm starting to love myself.
Just listening to you ladies, I mean, it's just echoing the same thing that, you know, I was 14 the first time that I was involved with the system. And I mean, I was in the back of the police car, 14 years old, handcuffed because of a fight that happened at home. And, you know, my parents, I mean, they stayed together, they're still together today. And, you know, coming from Long Island, which is a suburban community, you know, that's not something that is the norm there. So parents have limited resources on what to have. Like, what do you do when your child is out of control? Or what do you do when, you know, your kid is skipping school? And in that case, the cops were called and I was placed in handcuffs. And the whole ride at 14 to, I didn't even know where I was going. And I ended up getting taken to the family court. And there was a petition filed, a PINS petition at the time, and it was just so chaotic that I had no idea what was happening. I just thought, well, I must have committed a crime, must have done something wrong because I'm in the back of this car. And that just continued from age 14 on until 18, and I just kept going back and forth to court. Also in school, I was considered homeless because I didn't live at home, and I was actually kicked out of 3 different high schools, and it was very chaotic, and people in the school district didn't understand why I was acting out. I was disrupting class. I was disrupting everything that came into my path. I just destroyed it because I didn't have any support at home, and everything seemed that it was fine from the outside, but no one was asking those questions to find out what was really going on. And there was, at the time, there was a probation officer stationed in the school district, and she would, you know, full uniform, school resource officer is what they're called now, and she would come to class, make sure I was in class, and all my classmates thought that I was a problem. No one wanted to hang out with me. You know, my friends, their parents wouldn't allow them to hang out with me because I was that problem child. So that continued, and eventually, I ended up in independent living. So when I turned 16, I was eligible to go to this group home with other girls, and I started experimenting with drugs. I was smoking weed. I mean, I just wanted some kind of escape, like some kind of release, because I didn't feel any connection to anyone, not even to myself. So, you know, and then family court, going back and forth to court during that time, the legal aide who was supposed to be representing me didn't ask me, what do you want? What's going on? Or what's going on at home? Or where do you want to go? So I just kind of cycled through the system. And when I aged out at 18, there was no plan. Like, there was nowhere for me to go. It was just like, well, you've aged out of this system, and now we're just going to leave you to your own devices. And what ended up happening was, because I had no relationship with my family, that wasn't reconciled all those years from 14 to 18, I ended up moving in with a boyfriend of mine, and by the time I turned 19, actually 7 years to the day, I was arrested for my part in a robbery, and I was tried as an adult, and I served time in jail. And it's just been, you know, that all those missed opportunities from when I was younger, and it just seems so simple now when I look back on it, that all somebody had to do was ask me, what is going on with you, or how can we help you, or how can we support you? And that simple question could have changed the trajectory of my whole life. And it's just been such a struggle now, from being a girl and now being an adult woman with this felony conviction. And it's been so challenging to find a job. And you know, I'm not representative of the population of girls that are in the system. I mean, it disproportionately affects women and girls of color. And I feel like it's a responsibility that I have, and that I hope that those listening and those here today can understand that, like, we have a responsibility to speak out about it, because that's the only way that we're gonna change the hearts and minds of people that can make decisions And yeah, so it's just been challenging, and if we can change things from the front door, which is the girl system, then that would help.
I want to talk about this piece more that each of you has given voice to, of nobody asked me what was going on. And I've spent many moments and hours and days in girls' correctional facilities. And I remember the first time I went, I thought, my gosh, they're just girls. They're just hurt, abused, violated girls, right? And I want to understand better. Can you help me to understand better? Why is it that the system feels so comfortable just putting the girls behind bars than asking that question of what's going on?
Well, I think for girls, just overall, we're just looked at differently in the criminal justice system. People fail to realize that, when we offend, it's normally because of something we experienced in our life prior to the offense, either through, bad parenting or poverty or lack of education or being abused, and that when we offend, it's usually out of survival. So it's usually something we've stolen or, we've acted out, or because we were actually victims of something such as, sex trafficking or exploitation or even domestic violence. And when they look at us as women, because even as girls, we still are nurturers, we still help to provide for our family and for our siblings. So when we offend versus when boys offend, we should have known better. And we deserve the punishment we received, as opposed to boys, they're just youthful and immature. And when we are charged for our offenses, ours are gender-specific offenses and so, because they're gender-specific offenses, we're perceived differently and judged differently and treated differently once we're in the criminal justice system, because what gets us in jail versus what gets boys in jail, they don't really know how to deal with that. So they just look at us as being, we're just bad, or we're acting out, or we're whores because we were sexually exploited, or whatever the case. So we should be treated as such, instead of realizing that, we're more vulnerable, we're more fragile, we need more help because we're more susceptible to violence and to being treated differently. So it's just a totally different lens because of what because of our offenses. It's just different. And we often go to jail for, non-violent offenses. And we get these crazy, ridiculous charges for something that's minimal and something that had someone taken the time to say, what's going on? Why are you 14 in jail for prostitution? The first thing I saw when I went to juvenile hall, even though that wasn't my charge, was that there were so many girls in here locked up for having sex with adult men. I was blown away. And at no point did anyone say, what's happening, you're being exploited, you're being victimized. No, they were criminalized, and we're constantly being criminalized for things that we should be looked at as, ways to help us, and that's just not happening.
Well, I do believe that people don't get to the root of the causes of the problems. We put, let's say, we have talked who are the real expertise on these? Is it a book who's going to teach you, what is it going to be about in there? And no, of course not. We need to put the youth, we need to put the people, nothing about us without us, who are the ones who are going to come up with the solutions, because we experience what is the problem. And of course, we have all these amazing people that come here, that goes to the detention centers or whatever, and they have no idea. They don't know what it's like to be there. And most importantly, the people that come up with ideas go to these places, and when you're in that facility, we have seen people be treated differently. Kids who have been intimidated by the staff, and when you are in a facility once a month, once whatever, the staff are there for safety reasons, but are you able to speak freely? Of course not. Why? Because you get there and you leave. No, I'm stayed there, and if I say something wrong, what is going to happen next?
I just wanted to make a point that, a status offense. So when I was actually detained, a status offense is something, it's not a crime. And it's when it's because of your status as a minor that the action becomes criminalized. And that's what happened. That's how I started and I became involved with the system, running away from home and skipping school. I was placed in handcuffs and I was placed in a detention facility, in a jail cell, because I skipped school. And I think people don't realize that that's what we do here. I mean, if we really take a hard look at the practices and the policies that we have that affect girls and just all kids in general, like, we should not be locking up kids for skipping school. And you know, that experience and not asking children, or because that's what we're talking about children, what the reasons behind their actions are. And you know, I remember just being the only girl in the facility, and I would spend a lot of times, I mean, isolated, because like we need to be separated from the boys, and just there's always this notion to protect girls, and we need all this protection, and that was not helpful because the protection that's offered is punitive, and it really damaged the rest of my, you know, my trajectory. So I think it's important to listen, and there's a lot of assumptions that are made, I think, at different system points. When you're in court, the assumption is made by the judge that the legal aid has talked about this with the kid or with the child, and that's not what happened to me. So yeah, I think we just need to just start implementing that at every system point.
Can I add something to it? So I do believe that we are being put in the menu and not in the table. Yeah.
Being put on the menu and not at the table.
Yeah.
We unfortunately, what could be a whole day of conversation on girls, and we need to have a whole day on conversations around girls because of the systematic negligence that is being shown to our girls. We have to give the stage over to Kat Black and Maui Chacon, but I want to so deeply thank you for being the young women, the young fierce warrior advocates for other girls who are behind bars. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello, I just wanted to thank you guys so much for inviting me to introduce our next speaker. My name is Kat, and I've been a YouTuber since I was a young teenager. YouTube has been a very central place in my life, and it's really been where I've always come to express the things that have happened in my life, and the good, the bad, and the ugly. And unfortunately, while I had my platform, I experienced sexual violence. And because YouTube had been such an integral part of my life, it was where I turned to express my trauma. And that didn't go very well. I was told almost immediately that I had made up the story, that I had told the story for views, that I had fabricated it, because after all, who would want to rape someone like me? And so I internalized that, I deleted my videos, and for a really long time I didn't talk about it. But once I gained the strength to speak about it again, I realized just how much rape and sexual violence is a tool of silence, just how much it is used against women and people in general to silence them and to stop them from being able to get justice. That rape culture relies on this silence, and that social media especially is an amazing place for us to be able to come forward and speak. And when I started telling my story, I got contacted by women who had similar stories, who said that my story reflected theirs. And we all said to each other the words that we all needed to hear so badly, that we believed you. So social media has been a very important part of my activism and what I do. We've seen so many good and positive things come out of raising voices, and a lot of the women today that spoke are leaving me wanting to have conversations on my platform to draw attention to a lot of the things that I didn't know about were happening to our women and girls. Our next speaker is going to be Maui Chacon, who is a woman who has been using her poetry to fight against women who are being trafficked. So I just wanted to introduce Maui Chacon.
Hi guys. Okay. So yeah, I was trafficked at 12. Thank you. So I wrote this poem when I was 13 years old. I just wanted to give you guys a mind frame of where I was at the time. Am I walking through hell or beneath the shadows of death? I need someone to help me. I'm like a baby crying for a nipple, like a dog wanting its owner. Beautiful on the outside, but feel degraded, misused, and ugly on the inside. Why no one loved me for me? Pushing people away because they act as if they care. Like Tupac with his mistress love affair. Have a soul of steel, a heart as flimsy as a bird's feather. Like a tiger hunting for prey, but a mind frame of a baby cub. On the level of a great boat, and have a spark out of this world. And I have dreams, but what is that? I want to help people because I need help. I reach out to people because no one reached out to me. I'm living alone with no honesty and existing in this world with no dignity. They say I have a purpose, but what might that be? I want to be like Sleeping Beauty, hopefully wake up in someone else's body that's not me. I keep asking, who might that be? Want to be like Pink, how she's so energetic and so sweet. Like Gia Marie, crying like a puppy, acting out like Angelina Jolie, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, beating myself up, not me, but the inside of me. They say I act out because of my ADHD. I'm going to be me, learning to sit up like a baby, better yet, trying to come out of a cocoon, hopefully one day, or maybe, picking at cheese like a baby mice, like a caged bird screaming for food. Is it bad that my mind seeks the gates of hell, or wonders for a black night? Why can't I have someone hold me tight? I look at my reflection, and yet my body starts to feel cold, like a polar bear in winter, but a vampire at night. Katrina washing people away, and I'm trying to find that secret getaway. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Maui, for sharing your words. You know, the poem speaks for itself, but I feel so incredibly privileged to be in this room, and thank all of you for sharing your stories. We're so privileged to have you here at Google today. For those of you that I haven't met, my name is Ma'ab Ibrahim, and I'm a program manager at google.org, which is the philanthropic arm of Google. And I support our racial justice work. So I've been incredibly moved by everything I've heard today, and also reminded of sort of where we've started this work as Google and how far it's come. So I wanted to share a little bit of that story and reflect back to when we began our racial justice funding at Google back in 2014. And we were, to be honest, curiously optimistic about where it would lead. Like many folks in the room, there are definitely Googlers who have been impacted by the system of mass incarceration, who have parents and family members who are incarcerated today. And many of these Googlers advocate and volunteer with criminal justice organizations in their personal time. But working on the giving team at Google, we were trying to move this issue to the center of our company's consciousness and to bring it to a place where we could open that conversation to those who may not feel as proximate to the issue. And so I remember the day that my colleague, Justin Steele, got the signal from our executives to present our initial work in this area at our company meeting. And Malika referenced it at the beginning of our day. But it's a big meeting. Googlers from all over the world tune in on GVC, which is our kind of virtual way to connect. And the room isn't that much bigger than this one here, but we knew that thousands of Googlers would be listening, and it was our way to kind of test out Googlers' willingness to get close to the issue. And I remember on the back end calling our community partners and letting them know, many of them who were now supporting through our grants, that this work was going to be talked about during our company meeting. And I actually didn't share how big that meeting was, so they might think it was just a couple of folks who were interested in hearing more about their work. But the response from Googlers that day, and to this day, Googlers who are challenging themselves to learn more about this issue and supporting the folks that have boots on the ground, it really inspires us on our team to keep moving the company forward and challenging ourselves to
discuss this conversation and push where we haven't pushed before. So our employees have hosted movie screenings on mass incarceration, both on campus and in the community, policy convenings like today on criminal justice, brought some of the nation's most prominent speakers and voices in the movement, folks like Brian Stevenson and Gina Clayton, to our campus and are volunteering in the communities and in prisons. And we think that's very important. We're very excited now to be testing out Googlers actually getting on the ground in the office and working alongside one of our community partners, Center for Policing Equity, to engineer systems and help build a national database that can help reduce bias in policing. And so I just wanted to share with the room that we're pushing ourselves to get smarter and do more. And I want to encourage everyone who's listening from the company side on the GVC today to really just continue your volunteering, your giving, and learn more about this issue. And as we are challenged today, make an intentional effort to support and share our platform with women and girls who are directly impacted. You can go to go/getproximate if you're listening in to get involved with our volunteering efforts at google.org in criminal justice. And then for the folks who are in the room, let's please find ways to collaborate. If you have a creative idea on how we can share our platforms, please find me after this event, or you can reach out to me. My email address is maab@google.org. And you can learn more about our criminal justice grant-making efforts at www.google.org. So thank you all for sharing this room with us today and for sharing your voices and your stories. We really appreciate it.
I want to thank everybody for being with us today. And I want to give special thanks and honor to the women and girls who not only shared their narratives, but also their expertise of how we dismantle these pipelines into incarceration for women and girls. I also want to say to those in the room and those who are listening in that one powerful way of being part of this movement to make sure that our women and girls are not left behind is to know what the National Council for Formerly Incarcerated and Incarcerated Women and Girls is up to. If you go to their website, you can find out how to donate to them as well as be part of the campaigns that they are advancing. I also want to plead to make sure that we as a company continue to be proximate, continue to recognize that this issue is at the center of all of our work and communities and lives, that it is not marginal, that it is part of how we can use our goodness and use our wisdom and use our platforms to make sure that we live in a society where everyone is valued, where every life, where every mother-child bond is honored and has the chance to be. And finally, I want to close us out on two notes of gratitude. Gratitude to Topeka Sam for helping us bring the women in. We have to keep thinking about ways to use tech to scale the prison walls, and we tried to do that today, and thank you, Topeka, for helping us to do that, to bring the voices of Miss Alice and Miss Santra into our space. And I also want to give special thanks to Greer Stockman, who allowed this all to come together. Thank you for all of the courage that was shown today, and we are going to close out with Kristen Lien, allowing us to just breathe in this moment and think how we are going to move forward in the work before us. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. There's two songs I want to play for you today that I think are very fitting. And before I do, while I set up and tune my instrument over here, if anyone that's way in the distance feels far away wants to come over to this side, we'll have a second for you to do that. The first song I want to play is called The Escape. And it's from an album that's coming out later this year. And this song, this single, actually is going to drop on Thursday, so you guys are hearing it before everyone else. And it's called The Escape because my new album is about a character who escapes a prison. And I wrote this I wrote this song not just about escaping a physical prison, but the kind that we impose on ourselves in terms of the kind of self-love we give ourselves, or how we allow other people to dictate who we are and what we can be. So I hope you enjoy it, and then I'll explain the second song here. So thank you very much. you. Thank you so much for everyone sharing stories today. It has just been an incredible day, and leads me to why I want to play this next song that I wrote called Unconditional. And I called it Unconditional because I wanted to write a song that captured the essence of unconditional love. Not just any kind of love, but unconditional. It's the kind that loves you not only in your best moments, but your worst moments, you know? The kind of love that accepts you for who you are, including the highest version of yourself, and then that monster that comes out sometimes that we're ashamed of, but is a part of us, you know? The stories of our lives that we can't be without, because as hard as they are, they made us. They are us. So I wanted to see if I could write a song, even if without lyrics, that could capture that feeling of what it means to be unconditionally loved for those of us who know that feeling. Because even though everyone deserves unconditional love, not everyone has it. So I thought if I could capture it in a song, we could all share it. Thank you.